The envelope was already open. It was sitting on the kitchen counter. Face down. Like someone had placed it there deliberately. I noticed it the moment I walked in. I didn't touch it. I just looked at it. My mother was at the stove. She didn't turn around. She kept stirring something that didn't need stirring. I set my keys down slowly. She still didn't turn around. That's when I realized something was very wrong. I'm not someone who dramatizes things. I work in logistics. I manage timelines, inventory, documentation. I deal in facts. I've done that for 11 years, and it has made me patient in a way that most people misread as indifference. I'm not indifferent. I just don't move until I understand what I'm looking at. My father passed 8 months before that Thanksgiving. Quietly, the way he did most things. He was a reserved man, practical, fair. He'd built a modest life. A house, some savings, a small rental property 2 towns over. Nothing extravagant. But real. Tangible. The kind of wealth that takes 30 years to accumulate, and 30 seconds to redirect. After the funeral, my mother changed. Not in the ways you'd expect. Not grief, exactly. It was something more deliberate than that. She became organized in a way she'd never been before. Paperwork started appearing on the dining room table. Phone calls happened behind closed doors. A man I didn't recognize came to the house twice in 1 week and left without being introduced. I asked her once who he was. She said, "A friend of your father's." My father didn't have friends who wore that kind of watch. My younger brother noticed things too, but he brushed it off. He told me I was grieving in a strange way. That I was projecting. That Mom was just handling things, and I should let her. He meant well. He always does. But he has always trusted surfaces. I don't. By October, small things had shifted. My father's desk had been cleared. His filing cabinet, which had always been locked, was now always open and always empty. A framed photo of the 3 of us at a lake house was gone from the hallway. Not moved. Gone. I mentioned the photo to my mother. She said she hadn't noticed. The nail hole was still in the wall. I didn't push. I didn't accuse. I had nothing solid yet. Only the particular feeling you get when a story isn't adding up, when the details are too conveniently vague, when the person you're watching is performing calm rather than feeling it. Thanksgiving came. My brother drove up. We sat down to dinner. It was almost normal. Turkey, the good plates, candles she never usually lit. Then, somewhere between the main course and dessert, she looked at me across the table and said, without any particular expression, "You know your father's estate is being handled. You'll receive nothing that wasn't intended for you." My brother looked at his plate. I looked at her. She went back to eating. I didn't respond. I didn't ask what that meant. I just filed it. Word for word. Tone and all. Because there was something wrong with the sentence. It wasn't reassuring. It was a warning dressed as a statement. And people only say things like that when they've already done something they don't want you to find. So I stopped reacting. And I started watching. I started with what I could access legally and without announcement. My father had named me as a secondary contact on his primary bank account. Not executor. Just contact. Most people wouldn't think that meant much. But it meant I could request a statement of activity for the 6 months prior to his passing. Nothing invasive. Just dates, amounts, and transaction categories. I requested it in November. It arrived by mail in early December. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and read it twice. In the 14 months before my father died, there had been 11 transfers. Each one between $4,000 and $9,000. All of them going to the same external account. All of them categorized as personal transfer. All of them processed on weekdays, mid-morning, the kind of time when someone is home alone. I added them up on a notepad. $73,000. I put the pen down. I didn't call anyone. I didn't react. I just sat with it for a while. My father had been ill for the last 2 years of his life. Progressive. Slow at first, then faster. By the final 6 months, he'd had difficulty with fine motor tasks. Writing. Typing. Signing his name. I knew that. The whole family knew that. What I didn't know, until I made a quiet call to the county recorder's office, was that the deed to the rental property had been transferred out of my father's name 14 weeks before he died. 14 weeks. The transfer had been notarized. Signed. Filed correctly. Everything looked clean on paper. But I knew what my father's signature looked like at the end. I had cards. I had a birthday letter he'd sent me 7 months before he passed. His handwriting by that point was unsteady. Compressed. The letters didn't connect the way they used to. I pulled the deed transfer document through a public records request. The signature was clean. Fluid. Confident. It didn't match. I placed the birthday letter next to the document on my kitchen table and took a photograph of both of them side by side. I didn't need a forensic expert to see what I was seeing. But I knew that eventually, one would confirm it. There was one more thing. My father had a personal email account. Old, rarely used. He'd given me the login years ago, in case something happened to him. I had never used it. After seeing the deed, I logged in for the first time. There were 3 emails in the drafts folder. Never sent. Dated within the last 4 months of his life. I don't know if he wrote them knowing he'd never send them. I don't know if he was protecting someone, or just too tired to fight. But they were there. Plain language. No accusations, but a clear picture of a man who understood that things were being taken from him and didn't have the strength left to stop it. He mentioned the transfers. He mentioned the property. He mentioned being asked to sign things he wasn't given time to read. He mentioned her by name. I closed the laptop. I sat in my kitchen for a long time. There was nothing loud in that moment. No anger in the way people expect it. Just something cold and clarifying settling into place. The kind of clarity that doesn't leave. I thought about calling her. I thought about what I would say. I thought about Thanksgiving, and the sentence she delivered so calmly over turkey. Confronting them would have ruined everything. The first thing I did was make copies of everything. Not just digital copies. Physical copies, stored in 3 separate locations. One set went into a fireproof box at my apartment. One set went to a safety deposit box I opened at a bank branch in a town I don't usually visit. The third set I mailed to myself through certified mail and left it sealed. A poor man's time-stamping method, but it holds up. I photographed every document. I scanned everything with a portable scanner I bought for $40. I created 2 encrypted folders in separate cloud accounts, each with a different email address, each with 2-factor authentication. I did all of this before I called anyone. When I was ready, I found an estate attorney. Not through a referral. Not someone connected to my family's county or circle. I searched 3 counties over, read reviews carefully, and chose someone whose background was in contested estates and elder financial law. Her name didn't matter. What mattered was that she'd seen this before. I sent her a summary document before our first meeting. 12 pages. Organized chronologically. Transfers, dates, deed filing, signature comparison, email drafts. Everything referenced and attached. I'd spent a weekend putting it together the way I'd put together a logistics audit. Clean, factual, no emotional language. She called me 2 days after I sent it. She said, "I want to meet with you this week." That was enough. We met for 2 hours. She asked precise questions. I answered them precisely. She didn't offer reassurance, and I didn't need it. At the end of the meeting she told me that what I had was substantial, that there were multiple viable avenues, and that the signature discrepancy alone warranted a formal investigation. She also told me that we needed to move before the estate cleared probate. There was a window. It was not large. I said I understood. While all of this was happening, my mother was planning Christmas. She called my brother, made shopping lists, asked what he wanted for dinner. She called me once to confirm I was coming. Her voice was relaxed. Easy. I told her I'd be there. She had no reason to think anything had changed. The man with the expensive watch had been identified through a little careful searching. He was not a friend of my father's. He was a notary. Licensed, but with 2 prior complaints filed against him in another county. Both complaints involved elderly clients. Both had been closed without action. My attorney had already noted his name and forwarded that detail to someone she worked with. 2 weeks before Christmas, a certified letter was sent to my mother's address from my attorney's office. It was not aggressive. It was not threatening. It simply stated that a formal dispute had been filed regarding the estate, that all transactions and transfers were under legal review, and that no further disbursements should occur pending resolution. She didn't call me after she received it. She called my brother. He called me and asked what was going on. I told him I'd explain everything soon, and that he shouldn't worry. He asked if I was sure about what I was doing. I said yes. I heard him breathing on the other end of the line. Then he said, quietly, I thought something was wrong. He just needed someone to move first. Christmas came. I drove to the house. I had my attorney on call. A second party, a county official connected to the probate process, had been quietly notified and was prepared. My mother opened the door and smiled like nothing had changed. She offered me coffee. I said thank you. We sat down. They thought it was just another day. It wasn't. We sat in the living room for about 20 minutes before I set the folder on the coffee table. I didn't open it immediately. I just placed it there, flat, and let it sit between us while she talked about the neighbors and the weather and whether my brother had gained weight. She was good at filling silence. She always had been. Then I slid the folder toward her. I said, I need to talk to you about Dad's estate. She looked at the folder. Then at me. Her expression didn't break, but something behind her eyes shifted. A small recalculation. The kind you only catch if you've been watching someone for a while. She said, I've already told you. Everything's been handled. I opened the folder. I didn't say anything dramatic. I didn't accuse her of anything directly. I laid out the bank statements. I laid out the deed transfer. I placed the birthday letter beside the signature on the deed document, the same way I'd photographed them weeks earlier. Then I placed a printed summary of my attorney's filing. She looked at all of it for a long moment. Then she said, You have no idea what you're doing. I said, My attorney does. That was when the front door opened. My brother had arrived. He'd known I was doing this. I'd called him the night before and explained everything. Walked him through every document. He'd been quiet on the phone, the long kind of quiet that means someone is rearranging things in their mind. He came in and sat down without saying anything. My mother looked at him. He didn't look away. I think that was the moment it became real for her. Not the documents. Not the attorney's letter. The fact that my brother was sitting with me. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She tried, for a few minutes, to explain. The transfers, she said, were loans my father had authorized. The property, she said, had always been intended for her. The signature, she said, was valid. I let her finish. Then I said that those were exactly the things a court would be asked to evaluate, and that my attorney had already filed the formal dispute, and that the notary, who had witnessed the deed transfer, had been flagged to the county licensing board. She went very still. The legal process took several months. I won't detail all of it, because it's still partially ongoing and my attorney has advised restraint. But the broad outcome is this. The deed transfer was contested and ultimately reversed on the grounds of documented incapacity at the time of signing. A forensic document examiner confirmed that the signature was inconsistent with my father's authenticated samples from the same period. The $73,000 in transfers became the subject of a formal civil claim. The notary lost his license. My mother did not go to prison. That was not the goal, and the evidentiary threshold for criminal charges is different. What happened is that she faced civil liability, the estate was reopened, and the assets were redistributed according to my father's original, earlier will, a document that his attorney had retained and that predated the transfers by 3 years. My brother and I received what my father had intended us to receive. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. There was no satisfaction in the way people imagine. My father was still gone. My family was not repaired. My mother and I don't speak, and I don't expect that to change. What I felt was something closer to completion. Like a door that had been left open for months had finally, quietly, been closed. I drove home that evening through empty streets. No music. Just the sound of the road. I made tea when I got in. I sat by the window for a while. I thought about my father. His handwriting at the end, slow and uncertain. The emails he'd written and never sent. The fact that he'd held on to my birthday, and still managed to write something kind. I thought about the folder on the coffee table. The silence in that room. I thought about how long I'd waited. How carefully I'd moved. How none of it had required shouting, or breaking, or becoming someone I didn't want to be. The rental property is being managed now. The savings are where they should be. The house will eventually be sorted too, through proper channels, in proper time. None of it brings him back. But it honors what he built. And I think, if he'd had the strength, he would have done the same thing. That night, everything was quiet.